Imagine a world where the air itself bites, where the wind howls across a barren white wasteland, and where the faint glow of the sun does little more than illuminate the cold. Tens of thousands of years ago, during the last ice age, the Earth was locked in a deep freeze that stretched across continents. Vast glaciers, some taller than mountains, carved their way through valleys and plains. The world our distant ancestors inhabited was not one of gentle seasons or warm horizons, but of endless struggle against nature's most merciless force, the cold. Snow blanketed everything. Trees stood like frozen skeletons, their branches heavy with ice. The sound of the wind was constant, a low, mournful song echoing across empty landscapes. In this pale, unforgiving world, survival was not guaranteed. Every breath was an effort. Every night was a test. For early humans, the Ice Age was both a crucible and a classroom, a time when the line between life and extinction blurred under layers of frost. The Ice Age was not a single frozen moment, but a series of long, repeating cold cycles that lasted for millennia. Temperatures dropped dramatically, glaciers expanded, and oceans retreated. Massive sheets of ice stretched over much of Europe, Asia, and North America. This transformation reshaped the planet's geography, ecosystems, and even the destiny of humankind. In regions where tropical forests once flourished, tundra and permafrost took their place. Herds of mammoths and woolly rhinos roamed the plains, their thick coats and massive bodies adapted to withstand the icy climate. Predators like saber-toothed cats and cave lions followed in their tracks, turning every open field into a potential battleground. For the small bands of early humans, the ancestors of modern Homo sapiens and their cousins, the Neanderthals, this was the age of fear and ingenuity. Food was scarce, shelter was fragile, and warmth was a privilege earned only through constant vigilance. The cold dictated every decision they made. It controlled when they moved, where they slept, what they ate, and even how they thought. The Ice Age sculpted not just the land, but the mind of humanity itself. The Earth's changing climate forced migration on a massive scale. As ice advanced, tribes were pushed southward in search of habitable lands. Those who remained in the frozen zones learned to adapt or perish. The contrast between regions became stark. Lush valleys became icy deserts, and life was reduced to its simplest purpose: endure another night. Each sunrise was a small victory, a defiance against the indifferent universe. In this environment, the smallest comforts became sacred. The flicker of firelight was not merely warmth, it was hope. The shelter of a cave was not just a home, it was a fortress against death. The bonds between family members were not only emotional, they were survival mechanisms. The cold stripped existence to its raw essence. Everything unnecessary, comfort, luxury, even dreams, was carved away by frost and hunger. What remained was the human will, stubborn and unbroken. The world's creatures responded to this frozen era in different ways. Some migrated, others evolved thicker fur or slower metabolisms. But humans did something extraordinary. They adapted intelligently. They observed patterns in nature, learned from mistakes, and began to shape their surroundings in subtle, deliberate ways. The Ice Age forced humankind to invent, to imagine, and to innovate, traits that would define their future. The struggle against cold was not just physical. It was the birth of human creativity. In these endless winters, the days were short, the nights painfully long. Darkness became as much an enemy as the cold itself. Early humans huddled together, their bodies pressed close for heat, their minds haunted by the howls outside. Yet in that darkness, something profound was forming. The beginnings of language, of ritual, of shared memory. They told stories to ease fear, to explain the unexplainable, and to remind each other why they must survive. The Ice Age, though merciless, was also the dawn of connection. There were moments when the cold seemed undefeatable. Entire tribes vanished without a trace. leaving behind only tools and faint markings on cave walls, silent messages from those who once dared to live in a frozen world. Yet, despite it all, humanity endured. Beneath the snow, beneath the wind, a spark remained, the instinct to resist, to rebuild, to begin again. As glaciers shifted and seasons turned, the earth occasionally thawed for brief periods, giving reprieve before the next wave of frost. These rare intervals of warmth were times of rebuilding, when hunters could roam farther, families could gather food, and children could laugh outside their shelters. But everyone knew it would not last. The cold always returned, heavier, hungrier, crueler. It was not merely a season. It was a force that shaped the soul of humanity. The Ice Age tested the boundaries of endurance. It stripped life down to its core truths, the need for warmth, food, and companionship. But in doing so, it also forged something eternal: resilience. From the depths of that frozen silence, humanity learned its most powerful lesson: that survival is not about strength alone, but about adaptation, cooperation, and faith in tomorrow. The story of the Ice Age is not just about the world that froze. It's about the people who refused to. As the scene fades, the camera would linger on the image of a small, glowing fire, a fragile circle of warmth in a vast white void. Around it sit figures draped in fur, their breath rising into the cold air. Behind them stretches the endless snow, and above them, the stars shimmer like frozen tears. The narrator's voice would whisper, "This was the world our ancestors inherited, and from its coldest nights, the human spirit was born." When the Ice Age tightened its grip across the world, survival was not a given. It was a fragile balance between the body's endurance and the mind's adaptability. Every breath carried frost, every movement stole energy. To survive, early humans had to transform both physically and mentally. The cold didn't simply challenge them. It reshaped them, carving the blueprint of evolution itself. In the earliest days, many species of humans roamed the earth: Homo erectus, Neanderthals, and eventually Homo sapiens. Each faced the same relentless enemy: freezing temperatures that could kill within hours. Over generations, those who endured were not the strongest or the fiercest, but those who learned to adapt their bodies and behaviors to the new world. Natural selection rewarded endurance, foresight, and creativity. In the silent war between life and cold, evolution became the unseen weapon. Neanderthals, for example, were built like living furnaces. Their stocky frames, shorter limbs, and broad noses were nature's insulation against frost. They conserved body heat far better than taller, slender humans from warmer regions. Layers of fat and dense muscle protected their internal organs from hypothermia. Even their noses, wide and deep, warmed the air before it entered their lungs. Everything about them whispered adaptation. But even these natural defenses had limits. To truly survive, physical evolution alone was not enough. The Ice Age demanded intelligence, an awareness of cause and effect, of shelter and timing, of tools and fire. Meanwhile, early Homo sapiens, though less physically equipped for the cold, possessed something far more powerful: imagination. They observed how animals moved with the wind, how snow buried tracks, how certain stones sparked light. Slowly, instinct evolved into understanding. They learned that wrapping animal hides around their bodies could trap warmth, that digging into the earth or snow could shield them from icy winds. They began to recognize that warmth could be created, not merely found, a thought that changed everything. This was the beginning of intentional survival, a time when humans stopped being mere victims of nature and started becoming its challengers. The cold taught them caution and strategy. Every movement mattered. Every decision, when to hunt, when to migrate, when to huddle, could determine whether a family lived through the night. It was not brute strength that defined survival, but observation, memory, and planning. And yet, adaptation was not just physical or intellectual, it was emotional. The Ice Age forced early humans to develop something modern people take for granted: empathy. In an environment where a single misstep could mean death, cooperation became the only way forward. No one could survive alone. They hunted in groups, shared fire, and cared for the injured or weak. This emotional intelligence, the instinct to help others, became one of humanity's greatest evolutionary advantages. The cold may have frozen their surroundings, but warmed their hearts toward one another. As winters grew harsher, humans discovered the subtle art of reading the landscape. They learned to follow the migrations of animals and to recognize natural shelters, such as caves or overhangs. They could smell snowstorms before they came, sense changes in wind direction, and remember distant paths across frozen plains. Each discovery added another small defense against extinction. Their minds became maps of survival, living memories passed from generation to generation beside the flicker of firelight. Over time, these adaptations became traditions. The skins of animals were no longer just coverings. They were stitched and tailored using bone needles, creating the first true winter clothing. Hides were layered, treated with fat to resist moisture, and bound with sinew to hold tight against the wind. What began as desperation became design. In every stitch was proof of intelligence, evidence that humanity was learning not merely to endure the cold, but to master it. The relationship between early humans and animals also changed during this time. The hunt was no longer only about hunger, it was about survival strategy. Humans began to observe how wolves worked in packs, how mammoths moved to warmer grounds, and how birds signaled seasonal change. From these observations came alliances, the first steps toward domestication. Wolves, drawn to human camps for warmth and scraps, became companions and protectors. Together, they watched the dark, hunted the snowfields, and shared warmth. It was a partnership born of necessity, but destined to shape the future of both species. Still, every adaptation came at a cost. The Ice Age was a cruel teacher. Entire generations perished before a single lesson was learned. Fire could die out. Food could spoil. Frostbite could claim a hand or a life in hours. But those who survived carried within them the story of progress. Each small success, a better shelter, a stronger spear, a warmer coat, became a thread in the fabric of human resilience. Inside the caves, when blizzards screamed outside, early humans found time to reflect. In their own primitive way, they began marking walls with pigments, drawing animals and shapes that symbolized life, warmth, and hope. These were not idle decorations. They were acts of will, affirmations of survival. Every painted mammoth or bison represented a triumph over hunger. Every handprint was a silent declaration: we are still here. Even the rhythms of daily life began to change. Sleep was shorter, closer to the fire, often shared among the tribe for heat. Children learned from elders not through language but through imitation, watching how to bind furs, how to build fires, how to listen to the snow. Each gesture passed down not just skill but instinct. Humanity's intelligence was no longer individual. It had become collective. The Ice Age did more than freeze the earth. It forged the human identity. It taught that survival was not about domination, but about harmony, with fire, with tools, with one another. Every adaptation was a conversation with nature, an exchange between danger and wisdom, between cold and courage. As centuries passed, the fragile spark of life became stronger. The species that once trembled at the howl of the wind began to face it with determination. They could read the sky, tame the flame, and shape the world around them. Beneath layers of fur and ash, a new kind of creature was emerging, one that could imagine the future. If the first chapter of humanity's story was about surviving hunger, this one was about surviving the cold. And in doing so, early humans discovered the core truth that still defines our species today, that adaptability, not strength, is the real measure of power. The Ice Age would continue to test them, but it could not break them. Each fire they lit, each shelter they built, each life they saved became a promise to the future. proof that even in the coldest, darkest age, the fragile spark of life would not be extinguished. When the sun sank behind the horizon during the Ice Age, darkness was not just an absence of light. It was a living presence, a force that pressed in from every side. The night was long, bitter, and merciless. For early humans, it carried both physical and psychological terror. The cold grew sharper, predators stirred in the black distance, and the very sound of the wind seemed to whisper threats. Every evening was a battle against the unknown, and the only weapon humanity possessed was a small, flickering flame. Fire was not a luxury, it was survival incarnate. Its warmth was life, its glow a fragile shield against extinction. Around it, tribes gathered, breathed easier, and dared to hope. In the Ice Age world, fire meant safety, food, light, and companionship. Without it, there was nothing but the endless cold and the encroaching dark. The mastery of fire was not merely a discovery. It was the turning point in the history of consciousness. But learning to command fire was a feat that took generations of observation and trial. At first, it came from nature, lightning strikes setting dry grass ablaze, volcanic sparks igniting nearby brush. Early humans watched from a distance, both terrified and mesmerized. The orange light danced like a living creature, unpredictable and powerful. Some approached, timidly, to warm their hands or to cook scavenged meat found near a burn. They realized something profound. Fire could destroy, but it could also protect. Eventually, they learned to preserve fire. Stones were placed around glowing embers to hold heat. Dry moss or animal dung was added to keep it alive overnight. It was not yet creation. It was survival through maintenance. A single spark could mean the difference between life and death. Families carried embers wrapped in bark or animal skin when they moved from place to place, ensuring that the flame never died. Fire became not just a tool, but a companion, a silent, glowing member of the tribe. Over time, humans learned to create it. By striking flint against pyrite or rubbing wood together, they could summon warmth from lifeless materials. The first moment a spark caught flame must have felt divine, a burst of power that transformed human destiny. For the first time, they were no longer at the mercy of nature. They had tamed a piece of it. Around that flame, human civilization began to flicker into existence. Fire changed everything. It turned raw meat into nourishment, making food easier to digest and safer to eat. It dried wet hides, hardened tools, and illuminated cave walls for the first works of art. But perhaps most importantly, fire changed the human mind. With it came safety from predators, and with safety came stillness. In the calm that followed, humanity discovered reflection. Around the fire, people began to talk, to share, to remember. The light of the flame illuminated not just faces, but imagination. As the cold raged outside, the fire's glow drew people inward. The tribe gathered close, their bodies touching, their breaths visible in the warm air. Flames danced across stone walls, casting moving shadows that seemed alive. Those shadows fascinated early humans. They mimicked movement, told silent stories. Some believed the shadows were spirits of ancestors watching over them. Others thought they were living forces, protecting the tribe from what lurked beyond the light. Out of fear and wonder, rituals were born. Each night became a ceremony of survival. Before sleep, someone would feed the fire, whispering to it like a guardian spirit. The crackle of burning would become a rhythm of reassurance. The fire pit at the center of the camp or cave was more than a hearth. It was a symbol of unity. Around it, laughter replaced silence. Songs were born, chants echoed through the dark, and knowledge was shared. The tribe's stories, myths, and memories all found life in the circle of light. But outside that circle, danger was constant. The eyes of predators glowed faintly at the edge of the dark. Wolves, cave lions, and bears waited for any sign of weakness. The contrast was absolute. Inside the fire's radius lay warmth, family, and safety. Outside it, cold, hunger, and death. Every night reinforced the importance of vigilance. Fire was a fragile wall, one breath of wind away from extinguishing. When it flickered low, hearts raced. When it flared bright, spirits lifted. The emotional rhythm of early human life beat in sync with the rhythm of the flame. Over time, the relationship between humans and fire grew deeper, almost spiritual. People began to treat it as something sacred, an element that connected the earth, sky, and spirit world. In some Ice Age cultures, the flame was believed to be a piece of the sun, stolen to keep humanity alive through the darkness. This belief wasn't superstition, it was reverence for the only force they truly controlled. The fire symbolized power over death. Even in their earliest art, fire left its trace. Deep within caves, the black soot of torches marked the walls near paintings of animals and hunts. These torches burned from animal fat, producing light that flickered across ancient drawings. The people who created them risked their lives, venturing deep into the earth just to capture the feeling of life glowing within darkness. Each flame guided them through the unknown, both literally and spiritually. The psychological effect of fire was immense. It gave structure to the night. When darkness once signified danger and death, the presence of fire transformed it into time for community, storytelling, and rest. The night became a rhythm instead of a threat, a cycle that balanced work and reflection, fear and comfort. This was perhaps the greatest change of all. Fire allowed humanity to feel safe enough to dream. With safety came thought. People began to see patterns in nature, the rise and fall of flames, the seasons of warmth and cold, the cycle of day and night. The concept of time began to form. Fire had not only extended their physical day, but expanded their mental horizon. Around the fire, humans learned to imagine the future, to plan for tomorrow, and to remember yesterday. And yet, fire was never fully tamed. It demanded respect. Those who grew careless, who left sparks near dry grass or abandoned a flame unguarded, saw its wrath. Fire was both giver and taker, a duality that mirrored life itself, creation and destruction in one. The Ice Age people knew this balance instinctively. They bowed to it, honored it, and feared it. In the grand story of humanity, fire was the first true alliance between human will and natural force. It turned cold into warmth, darkness into vision, and fear into ritual. It united tribes, gave birth to myth, and forged the emotional core of civilization. Without fire, there would be no stories, no families, no tomorrow. As the scene draws to a close, picture a vast frozen plain at night. Snow falls silently. In the distance, a small, trembling fire glows against the dark, surrounded by figures huddled close. Their faces, painted in gold and shadow, flicker with life. The camera moves slowly closer until the sound of their breathing and the crackle of the flame blend together. The narrator's voice would whisper softly over the wind. In the heart of the Ice Age, when night devoured the world, humankind fought back, not with strength, but with light. And in that fragile fire, the first spark of civilization was born. The Ice Age landscape was not made for comfort. The air was sharp as blades, the ground frozen solid, and the wind howled like a living beast. For early humans, shelter was not just a structure. It was a fortress between life and death. In this age of cold, where snowstorms could bury entire valleys and the temperature could fall so low that breath froze midair, the concept of home was born. It was within these primitive shelters of stone, bone, and hide that the first real architecture of survival took form. In the beginning, nature itself provided refuge. Caves, dark, damp, and echoing, became humanity's first safe havens. Deep within their rocky throats, the air was still, insulated from the screaming winds outside. The walls were cold, but they did not shift or crumble. Generations of Ice Age families took shelter in these ancient spaces, their fires staining the ceilings with smoke. When we step into those same caves today and see soot marks and faint drawings, We are looking at the fingerprints of survival, reminders of a time when those walls were the only things standing between life and extinction. But caves were not always available. As glaciers expanded, many tribes wandered across open tundras and plains where no natural shelter existed. Here, ingenuity became their greatest weapon. Humans began to build warmth from nothing. They learned to shape the land itself, digging pits, stacking stones, and creating structures that could trap heat. Using branches, mud, animal hides, and even the bones of mammoths, they created the first man-made sanctuaries in human history. The mammoth bone huts were among the most extraordinary feats of early engineering. Found across Eastern Europe and Siberia, these shelters were constructed by carefully arranging massive tusks and leg bones in a circular pattern, then covering them with hides and packed snow. The result was a surprisingly warm interior, insulated by both bone and air. A central fire burned in the middle, with a hole in the roof to let smoke escape. Families huddled around this fire, surrounded by the bones of creatures they had conquered, a poetic reminder that even death was turned into protection. Inside, life pulsed quietly. The floor was lined with animal skins, reindeer, wolf, or bear, soft against the cold earth. Every sound was muffled by fur and snow. The smell of smoke and fat filled the air. Outside, the wind screamed, but inside, there was silence, a fragile piece carved by human hands. The shelter was more than warmth. It was hope made visible. Over time, humans learned to refine their building methods. They discovered that layering materials created insulation, moss stuffed between cracks, mud smeared over hides, snow packed along outer walls. Snow, ironically, became a friend. When compressed, it trapped air and kept heat inside. This understanding transformed their relationship with the environment. The same elements that once threatened them, stone, bone, and snow, became the tools of endurance. These shelters also revealed the birth of planning and cooperation. A single person could not build a winter hut alone. It required many hands working in rhythm, lifting, binding, sealing. In this process, early humans learned teamwork not just as a hunting strategy, but as an act of creation. They learned to assign roles, to communicate, to design. In those frozen valleys, architecture was not just physical, it was social. The first communities took shape around the shared effort to build a place that could defy the cold. Every shelter told a story. Some were built low to the ground, nearly hidden from view, to resist the wind. Others were dug into hillsides, where the earth itself became insulation. Some tribes built semi-permanent dwellings, returning to them each winter like migratory animals. In these spaces, children were born, elders died, and traditions were passed down. The shelter became a vessel of memory. Each repaired roof and smoke-stained wall carrying generations of whispers. As their building skills evolved, so did their sense of home. The Ice Age forced humans to redefine belonging. Home was no longer a fixed place. It was wherever warmth could be built, wherever people gathered. It was a fire circle under hides, a cave corner lit by flickering light, a temporary dome of bone on a frozen plain. Home became an idea, the embodiment of safety in a dangerous world. In these small enclosures, life unfolded with quiet intensity. The family huddled together, sharing body heat, whispering stories to drown out the wind. Children played with carved bones or stones while elders repaired tools. Mothers tended to fires, making sure embers stayed alive through the night. Outside, snow fell endlessly, erasing footprints and hiding the world in white. But inside, humanity endured, a small bubble of warmth floating in an ocean of cold. The fire in the center of the shelter became the heart of existence. The people oriented their homes around it, an early architectural principle that reflected both necessity and belief. The flame was not only physical light, but spiritual protection. It defined the boundary between the hostile outside and the sacred inside. When storms raged, the shelter felt like a cocoon, a place where humans, fragile and mortal, defied the gods of frost with their ingenuity. This act of building, of taking what the earth provided and turning it into refuge, marked a profound psychological leap. It proved that humans were no longer passive creatures of the environment. They had begun to shape their world, bending nature to serve their survival. Each wall they built was a statement: we will not yield. Even as tools evolved, the spirit of those early shelters never faded. Later, when humans built huts, tents, and eventually houses, the same primal instincts guided them: to seek warmth, to create safety, to gather near light. The echoes of mammoth bone huts can still be found in every modern home, every hearth, every door that shuts against the cold. The Ice Age gave birth to the concept of interior life, not just as protection, but as identity. If you could step into one of those shelters now, thousands of years later, you would feel it instantly: the quiet heartbeat of humanity. The faint outline of soot on the ceiling, the blackened stones of an ancient hearth, the traces of bones shaped by human hands. In that silence, you could almost hear the crackle of fire, the murmur of voices, the sigh of relief that came with warmth. As the storm outside raged, early humans lay under firs, eyes heavy, listening to the fire pop and hiss. The night was endless, but for the first time, it felt survivable. The shelter, their own creation, stood firm. And as snow buried the world in white, inside those small sanctuaries of stone and bone, the species that would one day build cities slept safely, dreaming of dawn. In the heart of the Ice Age, the narrator might whisper, humanity learned that warmth could be built, that even in a world of deathly cold, the mind could engineer survival. From stone and bone, they created not just shelter, but the first true homes of the human spirit. Survival during the Ice Age was a delicate balance between energy expenditure and energy intake, particularly in the long, harsh winters when resources were scarce. For early humans, finding food was never simple. It demanded planning, skill, and adaptability, often involving complex strategies that balanced immediate needs with long-term survival. Hunting was central to life, but it was not only about killing prey. It required observation of animal behavior, understanding seasonal patterns, cooperation among group members, and the innovative use of tools. Humans who mastered these skills could secure protein, fat, and other resources necessary to endure freezing temperatures, while those who failed risked starvation. Large game, such as mammoths, bison, and reindeer, provided the bulk of nutrition, but they were difficult to hunt and required careful strategy. Tracking herds across frozen plains, humans noted seasonal movements, feeding patterns, and vulnerability points. Hunters relied on intelligence and coordination rather than brute force alone, using terrain to their advantage. Animals were driven toward cliffs, frozen rivers, or natural bottlenecks, where their size and limited mobility could be exploited. Teams would work together, often for hours or even days, to isolate a target. The process demanded endurance, patience, and sophisticated planning, reflecting the early humans' ability to adapt behavior to environmental conditions. Medium and small game were equally important, providing food during periods when larger prey was scarce or unavailable. Rabbits, birds, fish, and rodents were hunted using traps, snares, and nets. Early humans demonstrated remarkable ingenuity in constructing devices that allowed them to conserve energy while increasing their chances of success. For instance, snares could be set along animal paths, activated passively, ensuring a source of protein without constant exertion. Fishing techniques included hooks, spears, and nets, often employed in frozen rivers or near ice holes, reflecting a deep understanding of the aquatic ecosystem. These smaller prey species not only supplemented the diet, but also minimized the risk of starvation between major hunts. Preservation of food was critical. Without modern refrigeration, early humans relied on drying, smoking, and storing meat in insulated caches. Cold winter temperatures naturally slowed decay, but additional measures ensured that food remained edible for days or weeks. Fat was rendered for both nutrition and fuel. Bones were saved for tools, and hides were processed for clothing and shelter. Every resource was used fully, demonstrating a holistic approach to survival where nothing was wasted and every action contributed to long-term endurance. Cooperation and social organization were central to hunting strategies. Large game required teams of hunters working in precise coordination, while younger or less experienced members played supporting roles, tracking, maintaining fire, carrying tools, or preparing hides. Communication was essential, whether through gestures, primitive vocal signals, or shared understanding of strategies. Hunting was not an individual endeavor. It was a socially orchestrated operation, reinforcing bonds, teaching skills, and strengthening trust within the group. Through these activities, children learned not only how to hunt, but also how to observe, strategize, and collaborate, skills crucial for the tribe's survival. Seasonal changes dictated hunting patterns. In winter, prey was harder to find, often concentrated near water sources or specific grazing areas. Ice and snow altered animal movement, sometimes slowing them and making them more vulnerable, but also making tracking more challenging. Early humans adapted by developing tools suited to the conditions. Insulated clothing for warmth, snowshoes or simple foot wrappings for mobility, and spears designed to penetrate thick hides. They learned to exploit environmental cues, fresh tracks, broken branches, or disturbed snow, to locate animals, demonstrating acute observational skills and environmental intelligence. The psychological aspect of hunting was equally important. Ice Age humans faced constant risks, injuries from prey, attacks from predators, or exposure to extreme cold. Hunting required courage, mental focus, and adaptability. The anticipation of success or failure carried emotional weight, influencing morale and group cohesion. Rituals sometimes accompanied hunts, invoking protection, luck, or gratitude, blending practical activity with spiritual significance. These practices helped humans maintain mental resilience, turning fear into focus and uncertainty into structured action. The division of labor also enhanced efficiency. Skilled hunters were often responsible for the most dangerous and critical tasks, such as taking down large prey or navigating tricky terrain. Others prepared traps, preserved food, or maintained fire at camps. This specialization allowed groups to maximize survival, ensuring that multiple survival strategies were executed simultaneously. Knowledge was shared systematically. Successful methods were taught to younger members, while failures provided lessons in caution and strategy. Over generations, this cumulative wisdom allowed tribes to refine hunting techniques, improving efficiency and safety over time. Hunting was closely linked to migration. As herds moved across the frozen landscape, human groups followed, adjusting their strategies according to terrain, weather, and herd behavior. Temporary shelters were constructed along migration routes. Caches of preserved meat were established, and observations of prey patterns informed the timing of hunts. These movements required foresight and planning, turning hunting into a continuous cycle of tracking, adaptation, and survival rather than isolated events. The prey-predator dynamic also influenced hunting strategies. Humans had to contend not only with their targets, but with carnivores competing for the same food. Wolves, bears, and large cats could threaten both the hunt and the hunters. Humans learned to anticipate predator behavior, using fire, coordinated attacks, and vigilance to reduce risk. Hunting, therefore, involved complex calculations, assessing the vulnerability of prey, predicting predator behavior, and managing group safety simultaneously. Food preparation was as critical as acquisition. Cooking meat over fire not only made it safer to eat, but also improved digestibility, increasing caloric intake essential for winter survival. Tools like stone knives and scrapers facilitated butchering, while smoking and drying extended the shelf life of meat. Bones, sinew, and fat were repurposed for tools, cordage, and fuel, ensuring that nothing went to waste. This integrated approach reflects early humans' ability to manage multiple aspects of survival concurrently, blending hunting, preparation, and resource conservation into a cohesive system. Ultimately, hunting and food strategies defined the rhythm of Ice Age life. They required intelligence, coordination, endurance, and adaptability. Success meant not only nutrition, but knowledge transfer, social cohesion, and cultural development. Humans learned to read the land, anticipate animal behavior, and work together under extreme conditions. Every hunt was a lesson in strategy, observation, and resilience, shaping not just survival, but the evolution of human ingenuity. In the frozen wilderness, the narrator might intone, early humans discovered that survival depended on more than strength. It required cunning, cooperation, and constant vigilance. Every hunt, every preserved meal, was a testament to the intelligence and adaptability that allowed humanity to endure even the harshest winters. The Ice Age was a merciless teacher. It demanded not only strength but ingenuity, the ability to shape the environment into something that could shield fragile human life from nature's fury. In a world where the wind could strip the warmth from flesh in minutes, shelter was not a luxury. It was survival itself. The cavemen learned early that to endure the winter, one had to build, adapt, and defend against the cold. Before permanent shelters, humans were wanderers, moving constantly in search of food and safer lands. But as the world grew colder, movement became deadly. The snow thickened, rivers froze, and the nights grew longer. This was when necessity gave birth to creativity. The first shelters were simple, shallow pits covered with branches, hides, and earth. But over time, these crude constructions evolved into remarkable feats of survival engineering. The most reliable shelters were caves, dark, natural fortresses of stone. They offered protection from predators, wind, and snow. But even caves had their dangers. Water could seep in, ice could form along the walls, and darkness could swallow light. So early humans transformed them. They lined the floors with animal furs, built fire pits in the center, and used stones to trap the heat. Soot marks on ancient cave ceilings tell us that these spaces once glowed with firelight and echoed with the voices of families huddled together for warmth. For those who lived far from cave systems, innovation took another path. On open plains and tundra, where no stone shelters existed, they built homes from mammoth bones and hides. Archaeologists have discovered incredible Ice Age dwellings made from massive rib bones arranged in circles, tusks used as support arches, and thick animal skins stretched across the frames. Inside, a fire burned in the center, and smoke escaped through a small hole at the top. These bone houses were not just shelters. They were symbols of human intelligence and adaptation. In some regions, huts were built half-buried in the earth. The ground itself became insulation, keeping out the howling wind. Entrances were narrow and low to trap heat inside, forcing everyone to crawl in and out. These homes were often lined with moss, grass, and furs. Every scrap of warmth mattered. When storms raged outside, the family would seal the entrance with animal skins and wait in near darkness, listening to the roar of the blizzard just beyond their fragile walls. But shelter was more than just protection. It was psychological safety. The moment one stepped inside, the outside world, the cold, the predators, the unknown, faded away. Within those small, smoky spaces, humans began to form deeper bonds. They worked together to build, to repair, to maintain their fragile sanctuaries. The act of creating a home from nothing fostered cooperation and trust, the foundations of community. As their shelters improved, so too did their ability to stay in one place for longer periods. This stability allowed for more complex social behaviors, tool-making, art, and ritual. It was within the safety of these shelters that humans began painting their stories on cave walls, images of hunts, animals, and spirits. These drawings were more than decoration. They were an assertion of existence, proof that even in a frozen world, life continued. The materials used for building depended on what the land offered. In forested regions, wood and bark were the main resources. In open tundras, bones and hides dominated. Some shelters combined both. Wooden frames covered with animal skins, sealed with mud or snow. Each design reflected not just environmental necessity, but also creativity. Every tribe had its own method, passed down through generations, refined by countless winters. The warmth inside these shelters was precious. Fires were tended constantly, with one person often staying awake to make sure the flames did not die out. Stones were heated by the fire and placed near sleeping areas to radiate heat through the night. Even the placement of objects, stones, furs, tools, followed careful logic. Nothing was random in a world where every decision could mean life or death. To modernize, these shelters may seem primitive, but to those who lived within them, they were miracles, tiny pockets of warmth in an endless ocean of cold. Each creak of bone, each whisper of wind outside, reminded them of their fragility. Yet, as the fire crackled and shadows danced on the walls, they felt something rare and powerful: safety. When dawn came and the light touched the snow again, smoke from their shelters rose like thin columns of defiance. Against the white silence of the Ice Age, those fragile homes stood as proof that humanity could not be broken. The cavemen had learned to build, not just walls of bone and hide, but a sanctuary for the human spirit itself. From stone and bone, the narrator might conclude softly, our ancestors built more than shelter. They built the first homes of the human heart. In the frozen expanses of the Ice Age, food was never guaranteed. The snow-covered plains were silent, empty, and treacherous, but somewhere out there, life stirred. Mammoths trudged through drifts, reindeer grazed on buried moss, and predators watched patiently from the shadows. For early humans, the hunt was no longer just a means to eat. It was a battle against starvation, a test of intelligence, patience, and courage. Every step across the snow could lead to life or death. Every movement required precision and timing. Hunting in winter demanded more than brute strength. Humans learned to read tracks in the snow, to understand animal behavior, and to predict where prey would move. They observed patterns: how mammoths migrated to sheltered valleys, how reindeer grazed near frozen rivers, how wolves hunted in packs. This knowledge was survival encoded into instinct. A miscalculation could cost the tribe everything. An unsuccessful hunt meant hunger, weakness, and vulnerability to the cold. Weapons became extensions of human ingenuity. Spears tipped with flint, clubs carved from hardened wood, and eventually early bows allowed hunters to strike from a distance. Traps and pitfalls were set along known migration routes. Hunting was rarely solitary. It required coordination, communication, and trust. Teams would surround prey, using snowdrifts and terrain as natural barriers. Each hunt was a choreography, balancing patience, aggression, and timing. The hunt was dangerous. Predators, wolves, cave lions, saber-toothed cats, competed for the same prey, and humans were vulnerable without the protection of numbers, fire, and weapons. Injuries were common, and frostbite or exhaustion could end a life before hunger ever did. Yet, the hunt was also a teaching ground. Young hunters learned from elders, observing how to approach quietly, aim accurately, and interpret signs left by animals. Every hunt carried lessons about survival, strategy, and respect for nature. But hunting was more than practical. It was ritualistic. Prey was treated with respect, as the animals provided life, warmth, and materials for shelter and tools. Some evidence suggests that certain kills were celebrated, even mourned. The act of hunting became intertwined with early spirituality. Fire and blood, shadow and snow, life and death all blended into a sacred dance. These rituals strengthened the social fabric, reminding the tribe that survival was not just individual, but communal. Once the hunt succeeded, the work continued. Meat was butchered, hides stretched and tanned, bones shaped into tools. Nothing was wasted. Marrow from bones provided concentrated energy. Hides became clothing or insulation. Sinew turned into cordage for shelter and weapons. Every part of the animal became a lifeline, a testament to human ingenuity and respect for the fragile balance between predator and prey. The contrast between the harsh environment outside and the warmth of the fire inside was stark. Success on the hunt brought not just food, but relief, celebration, and temporary security. Failure brought hunger, tension, and the gnawing fear of the next storm. Each hunt emphasized that life in the Ice Age was fragile, and that survival depended on intelligence, courage, and cooperation rather than mere strength. Through these experiences, early humans developed skills that would define the species: problem-solving under pressure, teamwork, and strategic thinking. Hunting in winter shaped the mind as much as the body. The lessons learned on frozen plains, patience, observation, adaptation, became the foundation of human resilience. Even in the quiet aftermath of a successful hunt, the echoes of the frozen landscape lingered. Tracks of prey led to fresh snow, footprints of humans marked a path of triumph, and predators circled nearby, ever watchful. Survival was temporary, fleeting, yet precious. It required constant vigilance and a deep understanding of the world, a knowledge passed from one generation to the next. In the endless white of the Ice Age, the hunt was life itself, the delicate, dangerous, and essential art of taking and giving, of respect and survival. Around the fire, with meat roasting and furs wrapped tight, early humans could feel warmth, satisfaction, and the quiet triumph of having outwitted the cold, the snow, and the beasts that roamed the land. In every step across the frozen plains, the narrator might say, they followed the pulse of life itself, and in each successful hunt, they carved a path for humanity to endure the deadliest winters the earth had ever known. In the unforgiving chill of the Ice Age, survival hinged on the ability to create a safe haven against the relentless cold. The night was long, the wind bitter, and the threat of predators constant. For early humans, shelter was more than a roof over the head. It was a lifeline, a sanctuary where families could rest, warm themselves, and preserve the resources necessary to endure the frozen months. Fire, paired with carefully constructed shelters, became the centerpiece of human ingenuity, transforming a harsh and hostile environment into a space that could sustain life. The development of these strategies reflects both practical intelligence and the nascent emergence of culture, an understanding that survival required not only strength, but planning, skill, and cooperation. Caves were often the first choice for natural protection. Their walls provided insulation against the biting winds, and the earth itself maintained a relatively stable temperature compared to the harsh elements outside. Caves were strategically selected near water sources, animal migration paths, or fertile grounds for plants, balancing safety with resource access. Within these natural shelters, early humans learned to manipulate the environment further, clearing floors of debris, arranging stones to direct heat from fires, and fashioning partitions for sleeping or storage. The cave became a stage for early domestic life, where survival and social structure intertwined. When caves were unavailable, humans turned to constructed shelters, often using mammoth bones, wood, and hides. Large bones were arranged into frameworks, creating durable structures capable of supporting roofs made from layered hides or branches. This ingenuity allowed humans to inhabit areas with fewer natural shelters, expanding the geographic range of survival. The construction of these shelters required not only technical skill, but also coordination. Tasks were divided according to strength, knowledge, and age. Stronger adults carried heavy components, skilled artisans fashioned supports, and children assisted with lighter tasks, learning techniques that would ensure the tribe's survival for generations. Fire was the linchpin of these survival strategies. Beyond providing heat, fire allowed for cooking, which made food safer and more digestible, and it illuminated the darkness, extending productive hours. Fires were carefully positioned within shelters to maximize warmth while minimizing smoke accumulation. Stones or earth were sometimes used to contain flames, creating hearths that radiated heat efficiently. Mastery over fire was not simply about survival. It represented a profound cognitive leap, allowing humans to control their environment, fend off predators, and create a psychological sense of safety in the otherwise menacing landscape of ice and shadow. Maintaining fire was a skill in itself. Early humans gathered fuel methodically, selecting dry wood, grasses, and even animal fat to sustain flames over extended periods. Fire-making techniques likely evolved gradually, striking flint, rubbing sticks together, or transferring embers from one hearth to another. Fire became a communal responsibility, with different members of the tribe tasked with tending it through the night, ensuring that warmth and protection persisted even when some slept. This shared responsibility reinforced social cohesion, making fire not just a tool, but a symbol of interdependence and collective survival. Shelters were often insulated with layers of animal hides, grasses, and furs. The floor was padded to prevent heat loss to the ground, while walls were sometimes lined with materials that could absorb and radiate warmth. Sleeping arrangements were strategic. Children and elders at the center, adults surrounding them, and warriors or hunters positioned near entrances to guard against intruders. This design reflects both practical understanding of thermodynamics and a deep concern for social organization, where every individual had a role in maximizing the survival of the group. Firelight also transformed the psychological landscape of the Ice Age. Shadows danced on cave walls, providing a sense of movement and presence that could deter predators, real or imagined, and comfort humans against the solitude of long nights. Families gathered around fires not only for warmth but for social interaction, storytelling, teaching, and planning. These communal moments strengthened bonds, facilitated knowledge transfer, and allowed for the development of culture, embedding survival techniques alongside social rituals and emotional support. In addition to warmth, shelters and fire played a critical role in food preservation and preparation. Meat, fat, and other perishable resources were smoked, dried, or cooked, reducing spoilage and making nutrition more accessible. Stone hearths allowed heat to be concentrated for cooking or drying, while strategic placement of fire and shelters enabled efficient preservation even in freezing conditions. Humans learned to ration resources, alternating between immediate consumption and storage for the days when hunting was scarce. This interplay between shelter, fire, and food management highlights the holistic approach early humans took toward survival, considering heat, nutrition, and social stability as interconnected elements. The design of shelters evolved with environmental demands. In regions with heavy snowfall, sloped roofs prevented accumulation and collapse. In areas with strong winds, structures were oriented strategically to minimize exposure and maximize natural insulation. Materials were chosen for availability and functionality: bones for strength, wood for flexibility, hides for warmth, and stone for stability. The selection process demonstrates early engineering and environmental intelligence, showing humans as active agents, shaping their habitats rather than passive inhabitants. Beyond survival, shelters and fire provided a sense of control over the environment, mitigating the constant fear of predators and extreme cold. The ability to create a warm, safe space offered psychological stability, fostering courage, cooperation, and planning. Early humans could sleep more soundly, recover from exertion, and strategize for the next hunt or migration. In essence, the physical act of building shelters and maintaining fire became inseparable from the mental and emotional capacity to endure harsh conditions. The knowledge required for shelter construction and fire maintenance was passed down meticulously. Elders taught younger generations how to identify suitable materials, construct frameworks, maintain hearths, and arrange sleeping areas. This intergenerational transmission of skill ensured continuity and improved efficiency over time. Young members not only learned techniques, but also absorbed principles of safety, resource management, and social cooperation, lessons critical for both individual and group survival. Even temporary shelters, such as those used during migrations or hunting expeditions, incorporated sophisticated design principles. Lightweight frames, portable furs, and modular construction allowed humans to create secure resting spaces quickly. Fire could be rekindled at multiple points, ensuring warmth during movement. These temporary solutions were often as ingenious as permanent shelters, reflecting adaptability and an understanding of the balance between mobility and protection. Predator management was an additional consideration. Firelight, strategically placed spikes, and guarded entrances reduced the likelihood of ambushes. Animals, both prey and predator, were observed and accounted for when constructing shelters. By integrating knowledge of animal behavior into the design and use of shelters, humans turned a vulnerable space into a defensible stronghold, reducing mortality risks and increasing the tribe's overall resilience. In conclusion, shelters and fire were the dual pillars of Ice Age survival. They provided warmth, protection, food security, and psychological comfort. They facilitated social cohesion, cultural development, and intergenerational knowledge transfer. Every aspect, from hearth placement to sleeping arrangements, from insulation to fire maintenance, reflects careful observation, creativity, and cooperation. Without shelters and fire, early humans would have succumbed to the relentless cold. With them, they not only survived but created the foundation for complex societies, the seeds of innovation, and the early forms of culture that define humanity today. In the coldest nights, when ice and wind threatened to claim life, the narrator might reflect, our ancestors discovered that warmth could be crafted, that safety could be designed, and that survival was as much about ingenuity and community as it was about strength. Shelters and fire became more than tools. They became the beating heart of human endurance. Survival in the Ice Age was not just a physical challenge, it was a mental one. The freezing winds, the endless snow, and the predators lurking beyond the firelight created a constant state of tension. Fear was a companion as persistent as hunger, shaping every decision and every movement. Yet, it was within this fear that early humans discovered the profound power of family and community. Alone, an individual was vulnerable. Together, a tribe could endure storms, hunt effectively, and protect the weak. Survival became a collective effort, and with it, the first lessons in social psychology and cooperation emerged. The threat of the cold and predators fostered a heightened sense of awareness. Early humans had to be alert at all times, scanning the horizon, listening for unusual sounds, and anticipating dangers invisible to the eye. This constant vigilance was exhausting, but it honed instincts that would prove essential for survival. Even small mistakes could be fatal. Stepping on thin ice, misjudging a snowdrift, or failing to notice a predator's tracks. The mind adapted, learning to process threats quickly and act decisively. Fear, paradoxically, became a tool for life. Family units provided the first psychological shield. Parents protected children from the cold, taught them essential skills, and offered warmth and reassurance. Children learned through observation and imitation, absorbing knowledge about fire, clothing, hunting, and shelter. Elders shared wisdom, guiding decision-making during blizzards or when food was scarce. This intergenerational transmission of knowledge created continuity, a bridge between survival tactics and cultural memory. The family was both a physical and emotional fortress against the harshness of the Ice Age. Beyond the nuclear family, community bonds were vital. Groups pooled resources, shared food, and coordinated hunts. Cooperation reduced risk and increased efficiency. For example, while one group tracked a mammoth across the frozen tundra, others would prepare shelters or maintain fires. Social rituals, such as storytelling around the fire, strengthened trust and reinforced shared knowledge. In essence, the human mind learned that survival depended not only on individual skill, but also on collaboration. Fear itself became a shared experience, transforming into a psychological glue. Shared danger encouraged empathy, loyalty, and vigilance. Watching a neighbor falter in the snow or suffer frostbite stirred immediate concern. Helping the injured or weak was not simply moral, it was practical. A lone hunter lost to the cold or a predator meant fewer eyes and hands for the group. Mutual care became survival strategy, intertwining emotion with pragmatism. The Ice Age also forged rituals that mitigated fear. Early humans began observing patterns in nature, noting weather changes, animal movements, and seasonal cycles. They created simple rules and routines to anticipate danger. Even seemingly superstitious practices, such as leaving offerings near cave entrances or arranging bones in protective patterns, reflected a deep psychological need for control in an uncontrollable environment. Rituals provided a sense of predictability and agency, a mental buffer against the chaos of the world outside the fire. Community cohesion also fostered creativity and problem-solving. Shared labor enabled the construction of more sophisticated shelters, better clothing, and more effective tools. It allowed knowledge to accumulate over generations, laying the foundation for cultural evolution. The Ice Age was harsh, but within the social fabric of the tribe, humans discovered resilience beyond the individual, a collective strength born of fear, necessity, and trust. Even sleep was shaped by these dynamics. Nights were long and perilous, and rest required proximity to warmth and other humans. Families and groups huddled close, bodies intertwined for heat and safety. Dreams were likely punctuated by the sounds of the wind, the movement of animals, and the flickering shadows of fire. Yet, this communal approach to survival created security, allowing humans to rest and recover, preparing for the next day's challenges. In the end, the psychology of survival in the Ice Age was as much about mental adaptation as physical endurance. Fear, if managed collectively, became a motivator. Family and community offered both protection and instruction. Social bonds transformed vulnerability into strength, and the act of caring for others became inseparable from the act of staying alive. In the endless cold, the narrator might reflect, the mind learned as much as the body that courage, trust, and connection were as essential as fire and furs. Survival was never solitary. It was a shared endeavor, written into the very heart of humanity. In the unforgiving winters of the Ice Age, catching prey was only the first step in survival. Preserving it was just as crucial. Fresh meat spoiled quickly, and a single failed hunt could leave a tribe starving for days or weeks. Early humans learned to think not just in terms of immediate hunger, but in terms of future sustenance, creating strategies to store and protect food against freezing temperatures, scavengers, and time itself. Once a hunt succeeded, the work intensified. Large animals like mammoths, reindeer, and bison provided massive amounts of meat, but their size also meant a challenge: how to keep it from rotting or freezing beyond usability. Humans quickly discovered natural refrigeration. Snow and ice could preserve flesh for days, sometimes weeks. Cavemen would carefully place meat in shallow pits lined with stones, then cover it with snow and hides. These early iceboxes allowed the tribe to ration food over time, ensuring that no kill went to waste. Drying meat was another critical method. Thin strips of meat were hung near the fire or in the warmth of a cave, dehydrating slowly and becoming tougher but long-lasting. Smoke from the fire added flavor and acted as a preservative, deterring insects and bacteria. This was the origin of jerky, a technique that allowed hunters to carry portable protein on long treks or during migrations. The combination of cold storage, drying, and smoking created a system that stretched survival across harsh winters. Bones and organs were never wasted. Marrow provided concentrated nutrition and fat, critical for energy in sub-zero temperatures. Organs offered vitamins and minerals essential for maintaining health. Hides and sinew were transformed into clothing, tools, and cordage. In every successful hunt, humans practiced total utilization, a principle that reflected both respect for the animal and practical survival strategy. Nothing was frivolous. Everything served life. Food preservation also required foresight and planning. Tribes needed to anticipate scarcity, tracking the seasonal availability of game and storing meat accordingly. Hunting became a calculated process, not simply chasing prey, but observing migration patterns, understanding behavior, and coordinating group efforts. Failure was costly. Success meant life through the harshest months. This strategic thinking was the foundation of long-term survival and a precursor to early agriculture and storage methods in later human history. Social cooperation played a critical role. Preserving meat was rarely an individual task. Groups worked together to butcher, dry, and store food. Knowledge of preservation techniques was passed from elders to younger members, ensuring that every generation could survive despite unpredictable winters. Shared resources strengthened social bonds and reinforced community cohesion. Every preserved meal became a testament to collective effort and ingenuity. The act of preserving food also influenced psychology and culture. Knowing that sustenance was available reduced anxiety and allowed humans to focus on other survival tasks, maintaining shelters, tending fire, crafting tools, or planning migrations. Rituals sometimes accompanied the storage of food, acknowledging the animal's sacrifice and the tribe's dependence on it. These practices reinforced respect for nature and a sense of interconnectedness with the environment. Ice Age humans also learned to rotate and monitor food stores, consuming more perishable portions first while leaving long-lasting reserves untouched. This early form of resource management demonstrated advanced planning and adaptation, highlighting the intellectual evolution occurring alongside physical survival. The ability to plan, ration, and preserve effectively was often the difference between life and death during extended blizzards or when prey became scarce. The combination of hunting skill and preservation techniques allowed early humans to venture into previously inhospitable regions. Tribes could travel farther, settle in colder zones, and survive longer without constant hunting. Food security became a cornerstone of human expansion, supporting not only survival but growth, migration, and the development of more complex societies. Ultimately, hunting and preservation were inseparable aspects of Ice Age life. Catching an animal was only half the challenge. Sustaining the tribe through the long winter required foresight, cooperation, and clever use of resources. Fire, snow, wind, and the understanding of the natural world all became tools in a larger strategy to secure life itself. In every preserved meal, the narrator might reflect, there was a story of intelligence, patience, and respect, a silent triumph of humanity over the relentless cold, a promise that life could endure even when the world was frozen. In the relentless winters of the Ice Age, survival was as much about movement as it was about fire, clothing, or shelter. Resources were never permanent. Snow blanketed the plains, rivers froze, and the herds that provided food, clothing, and tools migrated across the frozen landscape. Early humans learned that to endure, they had to follow the rhythms of nature, tracking animals, adjusting to seasons, and moving as conditions demanded. Migration was not simply travel. It was a strategic, calculated dance with life itself. Herds of reindeer, mammoths, and bison dictated the pace of human movement. People observed the patterns of these animals across generations, learning when they would pass certain valleys or congregate near frozen rivers. Maps of behavior formed in the mind long before they were ever drawn in stone. Early humans developed an intuitive understanding of geography, climate, and animal psychology. Missing the migration could mean starvation. Following it could ensure survival through the harshest months. Traveling across frozen plains was perilous. Ice could conceal hidden water, snowdrifts could trap the unwary, and blizzards could disorient even the most experienced hunters. Groups moved carefully, often in tight formation, sharing warmth and ensuring that no one strayed. Children and elders were protected at the center, while stronger members scanned the horizon for signs of prey or predators. Every step was deliberate, every decision measured against the unforgiving environment. Migration required more than physical endurance. It demanded planning and resource management. Groups needed to carry fire, clothing, tools, and food stores while maintaining mobility. Fires had to be rekindled, shelters built temporarily along the route, and hunting opportunities seized along the way. Coordination was essential. A miscalculation could leave the tribe exposed to the cold or separated from vital resources. Survival depended on foresight, strategy, and the careful orchestration of human effort. The movement of humans across the Ice Age landscape also strengthened social bonds. Traveling together required cooperation, trust, and communication. Shared responsibilities, tending fires, scouting, carrying supplies, reinforced the sense that survival was a collective effort. Stories, songs, and rituals provided rhythm and morale during long journeys. Even the cold, harsh environment became a teacher, shaping not just bodies, but social structures, leadership, and decision-making skills. Migration also fostered innovation. Temporary shelters, portable clothing, and preservation techniques all evolved to meet the demands of a nomadic existence. Knowledge accumulated over time, passed down through generations, ensuring that each new group could move smarter, hunt more effectively, and endure longer. Humans were not simply reacting to the environment. They were learning, adapting, and gradually mastering it. Following herds shaped the human relationship with the natural world. People became keen observers of animal behavior, weather patterns, and terrain. Every winter became a lesson in timing and adaptability. They learned to anticipate movements, recognize warning signs, and make choices that balanced immediate survival with long-term planning. This connection to the land and its creatures was both practical and profound, a bond that defined early human existence. Seasonal migrations also influenced early human culture. Patterns of movement dictated where families settled temporarily, where rituals were performed, and even where art appeared in caves. These migrations created networks of knowledge and cultural exchange as different groups encountered each other along the way. Shared survival strategies and innovations spread across regions, linking distant communities through necessity and ingenuity. Predator awareness remained critical during migration. Wolves, bears, and other carnivores also followed the herds, making each journey a contest of observation, stealth, and coordination. Humans had to balance the pursuit of prey with the avoidance of danger, often relying on scouts and advanced communication to navigate the frozen wilderness. These challenges refined not only hunting skills, but strategic thinking and teamwork. Ultimately, migration was a testament to human resilience. It combined physical endurance, environmental knowledge, social cohesion, and ingenuity. Each journey across frozen plains was a demonstration of adaptability, a recognition that survival was not a static state, but an ongoing process of movement, observation, and decision-making. Without migration, humanity would have been confined to limited zones, but through it, people spread, adapted, and thrived in a world defined by extremes. Step by step, across ice and snow, the narrator might intone. Early humans followed the pulse of life itself, learning that survival demanded motion, foresight, and unity, and that the frozen world could be endured when the herd led the way. In the vast, frozen wilderness of the Ice Age, survival was not only about fire, shelter, and hunting. It was also about understanding the unseen forces that seemed to govern life. Early humans lived in a world of extremes, where the wind could freeze flesh in minutes, predators roamed without warning, and darkness stretched endlessly. In such a world, fear was constant, and the human mind sought explanations beyond what could be seen or touched. This is where rituals and beliefs emerged, forming the earliest frameworks of spirituality, magic, and a psychological protection. These rituals were more than superstition. They were tools to manage fear, foster community, and reinforce survival. One of the most fascinating aspects of Ice Age belief systems was the connection between shadows, firelight, and protection. Cavemen noticed that shadows cast by the fire seemed to occupy space and even interact with the world. Some believed that shadows could act as guardians, keeping malevolent forces or the cold itself at bay. In caves, flickering light against stone walls was not just illumination. It was a living presence, a sentinel that gave the illusion of control over the chaotic wilderness outside. These beliefs helped humans cope with the terrifying uncertainty of night and winter storms. Rituals often centered around the hearth, the one place of warmth and security within shelters. Families gathered to perform repetitive actions, stirring the fire, arranging stones, or moving furs in specific patterns. Each action carried symbolic weight. For example, carefully placing bones in particular arrangements was thought to ward off evil spirits or attract good fortune during hunts. Over time, these practices became codified, passed down as tradition. By repeating rituals, early humans not only sought protection, but also reinforced social cohesion, giving the tribe a shared framework to interpret the world. Art and symbolism were deeply intertwined with belief. Cave paintings, often depicting animals, hunts, or abstract shapes, were likely more than decoration. These images may have functioned as spiritual tools, invoking the favor of animals, predicting successful hunts, or honoring the spirits of creatures that had been killed for sustenance. The act of creating these images, carefully selecting pigments, brushing them onto walls, and maintaining the fire for light, became a ritual in itself, merging survival with symbolic thought. These expressions helped humans exert a sense of control over their environment, even when facing forces far beyond their influence. Another significant aspect of Ice Age rituals was seasonal observances. Humans noted the passage of the sun, the length of days, and the migration of animals. Special gatherings and rites often coincided with these natural cycles, helping tribes anticipate periods of scarcity or abundance. For example, certain rituals might be performed before the first major snowstorm or during the arrival of migrating herds. By aligning their behaviors with natural rhythms, humans increased their chances of survival while also creating a shared cultural identity grounded in the cycles of the natural world. Belief systems also served as psychological armor. In the harsh wilderness, fear was omnipresent. The howling wind, the shadow of a predator, the endless dark. Rituals provided structure, turning anxiety into manageable patterns. Through repeated actions and shared symbols, early humans could confront danger not only physically but mentally. The sense that they were under the protection of unseen forces, or that their actions could influence outcomes, gave them courage to venture out into the cold, to hunt, and to maintain shelters even during the worst storms. Rituals were not solitary affairs. They strengthened community bonds, creating trust and shared purpose. When a group performed a ritual together, whether lighting the fire in a precise sequence, placing bones in symbolic arrangements, or painting animal figures on cave walls, it reinforced social hierarchy, cooperation, and interdependence. Elders often led these practices, passing down knowledge that combined practical survival skills with spiritual guidance. In this way, ritual and belief became inseparable from daily life, blending psychology, culture, and survival strategy into a cohesive whole. Even the most practical activities were infused with ritual significance. Preparing clothing from animal hides, butchering game, and constructing shelters could involve ceremonial elements. Hunters might whisper prayers to the spirit of the animal they had killed or perform small acts to honor its sacrifice. Such practices created a moral framework, promoting respect for life and fostering sustainable practices. In an environment where resources were finite and mistakes could be fatal, embedding reverence into daily routines helped regulate behavior and maintain balance between humans and the natural world. Beliefs about spirits and protection also influenced sleep and rest, critical factors in enduring the harsh Ice Age nights. Humans often position themselves strategically within shelters, placing furs or protective objects in specific arrangements to guard against imagined threats. Firelight and shadows played a crucial role, turning ordinary objects into symbols of safety. By merging practical measures, warmth, shelter, and communal presence, with ritualized protection, Early humans created an environment in which psychological and physical survival were intertwined. As humans moved, rituals adapted. Seasonal migrations, hunting expeditions, and encounters with new landscapes required flexible beliefs that could address new threats. Portable objects, such as carved figurines or symbolic bones, might be carried as talismans, serving as reminders of safety and continuity. These mobile rituals ensured that even while exposed to the elements, humans could maintain a sense of control and spiritual coherence. The legacy of Ice Age rituals is profound. They represent the first deliberate attempt to structure human thought and action around survival, fear, and the unknown. Through shadow play, firelight, art, and ceremonial acts, humans transformed the intangible into tangible tools for endurance. Rituals provided comfort, cohesion, and courage, qualities as essential as fire, clothing, and food. In essence, these early beliefs and practices reveal the depth of human ingenuity. Survival was not only physical. It required imagination, symbolism, and the creation of meaning in a world dominated by uncertainty. By turning fear into ritual and danger into structure, Ice Age humans developed the psychological foundations that would support civilization for millennia to come. In the flickering shadows of a cave, the narrator might whisper, "Our ancestors discovered that protection came not only from walls and fire, but from belief, the courage to face the cold, the unknown, and the darkness together." In the frozen expanses of the Ice Age, humans shared their world with creatures both magnificent and deadly. Survival depended not only on outwitting prey, but also on navigating the constant threats posed by predators. Mammoths, bison, reindeer, wolves, cave lions, and saber-toothed cats were all part of the landscape. Some were sources of sustenance, while others were relentless hunters competing for the same resources. Early humans had to understand, respect, and sometimes fear these animals, learning lessons that shaped the evolution of hunting strategies, shelter building, and social cooperation. Hunting massive creatures like mammoths required meticulous planning, patience, and cooperation. A single individual could not take down such beasts, so groups coordinated attacks over hours or even days. Hunters studied her behavior, noting which animals were weak, young, or injured. They used natural terrain, driving mammoths toward cliffs, bogs, or confined valleys where the animal's size became a disadvantage. Spears, clubs, and later, throwing tools were employed with precision, each kill a combination of observation, timing, and teamwork. Success meant meat, hides, bones, and sinew, resources that could sustain a tribe through the harshest winter months. But not all animals were allies. Wolves, cave lions, and saber-toothed cats were constant threats. They stalked humans in the night, scavenged from kills, and sometimes attacked the unwary. Early humans developed keen awareness of predator behavior, learning to read tracks in the snow, identify calls, and anticipate ambushes. Fire and strategic positioning in shelters provided safety, while weapons allowed humans to defend themselves when necessary. Survival depended on balancing aggression and caution, using knowledge rather than brute force to coexist with dangerous wildlife. Animals also played a spiritual and symbolic role. Evidence from cave art suggests that humans attributed meaning to the creatures around them. Drawings of bison, mammoths, and predatory cats may have been intended to honor the animals, ensure hunting success, or protect the tribe from unseen forces. Shadows cast by fire on cave walls could transform ordinary shapes into living presences, reinforcing beliefs that animals had power beyond the material world. In this way, humans began to merge practical survival with psychological and ritualistic strategies, creating a worldview in which nature, spirit, and survival were interconnected. Resource use extended beyond meat. Mammoth bones were used to build shelters, tusks for tools or art, and hides for clothing. Sinew became cordage for binding and securing structures, while fat could fuel fires or be rendered for consumption. Each animal was treated as a complete system, with every part utilized to maximize survival. This respect for resources and careful management reflected both intelligence and ethical consideration, ensuring that tribes could endure winters when food was scarce. Observation of animals also honed early human cognitive and social skills. Tracking prey required memory, planning, and communication, as well as understanding herd dynamics and migration patterns. Coordinating attacks against large animals fostered teamwork, leadership, and the ability to teach strategies to younger hunters. Even predator awareness demanded alertness, foresight, and cooperation, emphasizing that survival in the Ice Age was a combination of knowledge, skill, and social cohesion. Interactions with animals shaped settlement patterns. Tribes often chose shelter locations based on proximity to prey while avoiding areas heavily populated by predators. Seasonal migration routes of animals influenced human migration, forcing adaptability and strategic decision-making. Over time, humans learned to predict animal behavior, turning instinct into practical intelligence that could be passed down across generations. Despite the dangers, some animals were domesticated or tamed in early forms, likely wolves or dogs, which could assist in hunting and provide warnings of approaching predators. These relationships demonstrate early humans' ability to form alliances with wildlife, leveraging mutual benefit to enhance survival. The careful balance between cooperation and caution became a defining trait, influencing the trajectory of human evolution. Even within shelters, the presence of animals, whether hunted or nearby, influenced daily life. Furs provided warmth, bones shaped tools, and fat fed the fire. Predators outside kept humans alert, reinforcing vigilance and unity within the group. These interactions taught early humans not only survival techniques, but also patience, observation, and respect for the natural world. In essence, the Ice Age was a world of constant negotiation between humans and animals. Every encounter was a test of intelligence, skill, and adaptability. Prey provided life. Predators demanded caution. Every animal interaction carried consequences. Through observation, cooperation, and ingenuity, humans learned to navigate a landscape dominated by giants, turning threats into lessons and coexistence into survival. Among the snow and shadows, the narrator might intone, humanity learned that every creature, from the smallest reindeer to the towering mammoth, held a lesson. To survive, one had to respect, observe, and sometimes challenge the giants that shared the frozen world. In the frozen expanse of the Ice Age, survival was a constant struggle against both nature and the limits of human ability. Fire, clothing, and shelter provided warmth, but the difference between life and death often came down to tools, simple yet ingenious implements that amplified human skill, extended reach, and allowed people to manipulate their environment in ways no other species could. The story of early humans is inseparable from the story of tools, for each invention reflected creativity born from necessity, intelligence forged under pressure, and adaptation driven by survival. Stone tools were the earliest and most transformative. Flint, obsidian, and other hard rocks were chipped, shaped, and sharpened into spears, knives, and scrapers. With careful craftsmanship, a single flint blade could perform the work of dozens of unshaped stones, enabling hunters to kill efficiently, butcher large prey, and fashion hides into clothing and shelter. Early humans learned to select the right material for the task, understanding hardness, edge retention, and durability. This knowledge, though empirical, represented a sophisticated cognitive ability, an understanding of cause and effect, and an anticipation of future need. Wood and bone became essential complements to stone tools. Wooden shafts strengthened with sharpened stone tips created spears that could be thrown at large animals from a safe distance. Bones were carved into needles for sewing hides, hooks for fishing, and awls for piercing materials. Sinew, tendons, and plant fibers were twisted into cords, binding components together and creating flexible, durable tools. Through this integration of materials, humans demonstrated complex problem-solving, combining resources from their environment into multifunctional implements. Fire itself became a tool multiplier. Heated stones could shape wood, harden spear tips, and even cook food to make it more digestible. Smoke served as a preservative and a deterrent for insects or scavengers. Early humans learned to control fire in conjunction with other tools, creating a synergy between technology and survival. A sharpened spear without fire was less effective. A fire without cutting tools could not transform resources into sustenance or shelter. Together, these elements amplified the human ability to endure extreme conditions. Innovation was not limited to hunting or food preparation. Tools facilitated shelter construction and defense. Stones were used to anchor frameworks, bones to support roofs, and sharpened sticks to fortify entrances against predators. Even snow and ice could be shaped with tools to create insulation or temporary walls. Each adaptation was a response to environmental challenges, demonstrating that Ice Age humans were not passive victims, but active agents shaping their world to meet their needs. Observation and imitation accelerated innovation. Younger members of the tribe learned by watching skilled hunters and craftsmen, internalizing techniques and eventually improving them. Trial and error was common, but mistakes were valuable, revealing limitations in design or material choice. Over time, incremental improvements accumulated into sophisticated techniques that allowed humans to survive in increasingly harsh climates. This process of knowledge transmission became the backbone of cultural continuity, ensuring that each generation was better equipped than the last. The interplay between necessity and creativity is especially evident in specialized tools. Ice Age humans developed fishing implements for frozen rivers, snares for small game, and projectile weapons for distant targets. Scrapers, awls, and blades enabled clothing production, while cutting tools facilitated butchering and preservation. These innovations reflected an acute awareness of both immediate and long-term survival challenges. Each tool was a response to a specific problem, a solution that could tip the balance between life and death in extreme conditions. Tools also shaped social dynamics. Skilled craftsmen gained status as essential contributors to the tribe's survival. Collaboration in tool-making and usage fostered cooperation and knowledge sharing. Certain tools may have been traded or passed as symbols of skill or achievement, reinforcing social bonds and hierarchies. In this way, technology was inseparable from culture. It was not just a means to survive, but a means to structure human society. Creativity extended into symbolic or decorative tools. Carved bone, painted stones, and engraved items reveal that Ice Age humans valued not only functionality, but also expression. These items, though practical in some cases, often carried ritualistic or cultural significance, linking survival with psychology and identity. The act of shaping materials became a cognitive exercise, developing fine motor skills, foresight, and abstract thought, traits that would become hallmarks of modern humanity. The cumulative effect of tool innovation was profound. It allowed humans to hunt more effectively, preserve resources longer, construct complex shelters, and defend against predators. It reduced the vulnerability imposed by extreme weather, extended the range of habitation, and enabled the establishment of stable communities. Tools transformed humans from prey into capable, adaptive hunters, a species that could manipulate its environment rather than be dictated by it. In essence, tools were the extension of human intelligence. They translated thought into action, observation into survival, and creativity into life. In a frozen world where every day posed new threats, tools were the difference between endurance and extinction. The ingenuity of Ice Age humans, manifested in stone, bone, wood, and fire, was a testament to the species' resilience and foresight. Every sharpened edge, every carved bone, every simple invention, the narrator might conclude, was a declaration that humans were not merely surviving. They were shaping the world around them, bending the ice, the snow, and the wilderness to their will. In the relentless winters of the Ice Age, rest was not luxury, it was necessity. The long nights, often stretching for 14 hours or more in high-latitude regions, imposed profound challenges on early humans. Sleep was dangerous. Hypothermia, predators, and accidents could strike while the body was vulnerable. Yet, without adequate rest, strength diminished, cognition faltered, and survival became nearly impossible. Early humans developed strategies for safe, restorative sleep, blending innovation, cooperation, and environmental adaptation to endure the frozen nights. Shelters played a central role in sleep. Inside caves, mammoth bone huts, or partially buried shelters, the environment was carefully managed to retain heat and minimize risk. Furs and hides lined sleeping areas, creating insulation against cold floors. Heated stones placed near resting spots radiated warmth, while small, controlled fires provided light and moderate heat. Even the placement of bodies within the shelter followed logic. The young and elderly were huddled together at the center, surrounded by stronger members who acted as a buffer against both cold and predators. Sleep was a collective endeavor, where social structure directly influenced survival. The psychological aspect of sleep was equally important. Long periods of darkness and isolation could trigger anxiety and fear. Humans mitigated this through rituals and shared practices. Fire, tending, storytelling, and repetitive tasks before sleep created predictability, calming nerves and reinforcing community bonds. Shadows cast by flickering flames on cave walls, once terrifying, were often interpreted as protective or symbolic, transforming fear into reassurance. In this way, rituals were intertwined with rest, providing both physical and mental security. Clothing and bedding also influenced sleep patterns. Layered furs kept the body warm while maintaining flexibility. Extremities were carefully protected, as fingers, toes, and ears were most susceptible to frostbite. Humans adjusted sleeping positions to maximize insulation and minimize heat loss, curling tightly or stacking furs for additional warmth. These adaptations reflect an intimate understanding of physiology and environmental physics, demonstrating that early humans were keenly aware of how to manage their bodies in extreme conditions. Sleep was not continuous. Many groups practiced staggered resting, where at least one person remained alert near the fire to monitor for predators or maintain flames. This shift system balanced risk and recovery, allowing humans to rest without fully relinquishing safety. The experience of night became a coordinated effort, a combination of vigilance, adaptation, and trust. This strategy reinforced social cohesion, as survival depended not just on individual alertness but on the collective watchfulness of the group. Even dreams and mental activity may have been influenced by the environment. The long darkness, combined with firelight and shadows, likely stimulated imagination and problem-solving. Observing patterns, remembering animal movements, and reflecting on survival strategies could occur during rest periods, preparing the mind for the challenges of the next day. Sleep, therefore, was both restorative and educational, offering a chance for cognitive rehearsal and reflection, enhancing human adaptability. Environmental cues also guided sleep cycles. Humans observed the length of nights, the position of the sun and moon, and seasonal changes to optimize rest. Longer nights in winter required careful management of energy reserves, food intake, and fire maintenance. Strategic napping during daylight or resting after hunting expeditions allowed humans to conserve strength. These patterns demonstrate an early form of circadian awareness, adapted to extreme and fluctuating conditions. Sleep arrangements reinforced hierarchy and social bonds. Elders and skilled hunters often took central positions, symbolically and practically offering guidance and protection. Children learned observation and safety protocols by sleeping close to experienced members. Through these arrangements, knowledge and survival techniques were embedded in daily life, blending care, education, and security. The night, though perilous, became a medium for teaching resilience and reinforcing social structure. Even temporary shelters, used during migrations or hunting expeditions, incorporated sleep strategies. Lightweight furs, portable bedding and fire maintenance plans allowed humans to rest safely even while on the move. This flexibility was essential for Ice Age survival, as mobility was often necessary to follow herds or avoid environmental hazards. Sleep was never passive. It was active management of risk and resources, a crucial skill that enhanced both individual and group endurance. Ultimately, sleep in the Ice Age was a complex interplay of physiology, psychology, and social coordination. It required careful attention to warmth, protection, and vigilance, while also providing opportunities for mental restoration and knowledge transfer. Early humans transformed vulnerability into strategy, turning the night, once a domain of fear and exposure, into a space of safety, learning, and resilience. In the frozen darkness, the narrator might reflect, our ancestors learned that rest was not surrender, but preparation. That sleep, carefully managed, was as vital as fire, furs, or shelter, a nightly rehearsal for survival in a world ruled by ice and shadow. In the vast, icy expanses of the Ice Age, survival was rarely static. The landscape was alive with movement. Herds migrated across frozen plains, rivers froze and thawed unpredictably, and predators roamed in search of food. Early humans had to match this dynamism with constant mobility, strategic planning, and sometimes conflict, both with rival tribes and with the environment itself. The long, brutal winters demanded not only endurance, but foresight, negotiation, and courage. Every journey carried risk. Every decision could determine the difference between life and death. Winter migrations were dictated by the movements of prey and the availability of resources. Large herds of mammoths, reindeer, and bison were essential for sustenance, but they were transient. Early humans developed intricate knowledge of migration patterns, tracking these animals over weeks or months. This required careful observation, memory, and cooperation. Hunters and scouts learned to predict where herds would appear, which routes were safest, and how to exploit natural terrain for hunting advantage. Missing a migration could lead to hunger and vulnerability, while precise timing allowed survival, and sometimes prosperity, during the harshest months. These journeys were arduous. Deep snow, frozen rivers, and blizzards tested physical endurance to the limit. Groups traveled in carefully organized formations. The young and elderly were protected at the center, while the strongest and most experienced moved along the periphery to navigate obstacles, hunt opportunistically, and guard against predators. Fires were maintained at stops along the route. Temporary shelters erected to shield against wind and frost. Every movement was deliberate, every rest calculated, reflecting the early humans' advanced understanding of logistics and survival strategy. Conflict was often unavoidable. Territory, hunting grounds, and access to resources could provoke tension between groups. When rival tribes crossed paths, competition could escalate into skirmishes or full-scale confrontations. These conflicts were not merely physical. They involved strategy, planning, and social coordination. Successful groups learned to protect their own while minimizing risk, often using knowledge of terrain, fire, and tools to their advantage. Encounters with rivals reinforced social cohesion within the tribe, as cooperation became essential to survival. Predators compounded the danger. Wolves, cave lions, and saber-toothed cats also followed the herds, hunting opportunistically. Human groups had to anticipate predator movements and adjust their strategies accordingly. Scouts were often sent ahead to detect danger, while hunters balanced the dual goals of acquiring food and avoiding unnecessary confrontation. This constant interplay between prey, predators, and rival humans created a high-stakes environment in which every decision was weighted by survival consequences. Winter journeys were also shaped by resource scarcity and planning. Food stores had to be managed carefully, with preserved meat rationed to last through travel. Furs, clothing, and bedding needed to be carried or layered efficiently, as exposure could be deadly. Tools and weapons had to be maintained and fire-making materials safeguarded. These journeys were exercises in multitasking, combining navigation, hunting, food management, and defense into a single, continuous effort. The cognitive demands were immense, but mastering them allowed humans to thrive where less adaptable species failed. Cooperation within the tribe was critical. Shared labor included scouting, carrying supplies, maintaining fire, and coordinating hunts. Children observed and learned. Elders advised. Each member played a role in ensuring the survival of the collective. Social bonds were strengthened under the pressure of necessity, with trust and collaboration often becoming the difference between life and death. This dependence on others fostered empathy, communication skills, and leadership, early hallmarks of human society. Rituals accompanied these journeys. Before moving to new hunting grounds or crossing frozen rivers, tribes often performed acts intended to invoke protection from spirits or the favor of prey animals. These rituals provided psychological stability, turning the uncertainty of the environment into a manageable framework. Ceremonial practices reinforced social cohesion and shared identity, reminding members that their survival depended on unity as much as skill or strength. Encountering unfamiliar landscapes and extreme, weather-tested adaptability. Icy rivers had to be crossed carefully, snowstorms navigated with improvised shelters, and terrain scouted to avoid hidden dangers. Groups learned to read the land, observing subtle signs of animal tracks, frozen surfaces, or shelter potential. Knowledge accumulated over generations. Every successful crossing, every safe migration, reinforced a growing understanding of the environment and refined the strategies of survival. Winter conflicts were not limited to other humans. Environmental challenges often acted as invisible opponents. Sudden storms could bury food caches, collapse shelters, or obscure tracks of prey and predators. Rivers could freeze too thickly to provide water or crack under weight, creating deadly hazards. Understanding and respecting these forces became central to survival. Humans learned to anticipate seasonal patterns, interpret natural signs, and respond proactively to changes in their surroundings. Survival was as much about predicting nature's behavior as avoiding predators or rival tribes. Success in these journeys meant more than immediate survival. It allowed for the accumulation of food, resources, and knowledge that could sustain the tribe through the deadliest periods of winter. Tribes that mastered mobility, observation, and cooperation could expand territory, access richer hunting grounds, and ensure the continuity of their lineage. These movements also facilitated cultural exchange. Encountering other groups allowed for the sharing of innovations in tools, shelter construction, and preservation techniques. Migration became both a necessity and a conduit for human advancement. The harshness of winter journeys also influenced physical and mental resilience. Those who survived developed strength, endurance, and cognitive acuity far beyond what static living could provide. Constant exposure to risk, combined with strategic adaptation, honed problem-solving skills, planning ability, and social intelligence. The Ice Age acted as both crucible and teacher, shaping humans into a species capable of enduring extremes that would have defeated most others. Ultimately, winter journeys were a complex balance of risk, strategy, and opportunity. They required courage, foresight, cooperation, and innovation. Every mile traveled was a negotiation with the environment, every hunt a test of intelligence, every encounter a challenge to social cohesion. In these journeys, early humans learned the critical lessons of adaptation, mobility, and collective survival, lessons that would echo through millennia, forming the foundation of human resilience. Across frozen plains, through blizzards and shadows, early humans moved with purpose. The narrator might reflect, their lives a delicate balance of courage and caution, their survival written in the snow, etched into the landscape, and passed down through generations as a testament to ingenuity, unity, and the relentless drive to endure.